What's up, guys? Merry Christmas to everyone. It's Christmas Day, so I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year coming up. It's been a while since I've done a video, but there really hasn't been anything to talk about in terms of the things I normally talk about, and my other interests don't really interest most of you guys, so there's no point in doing videos talking about those things. So basically, what I wanted to talk a little bit about is the upcoming NASCAR season, actually just the overall outlook on NASCAR as a sport. And there's a couple of new things coming for the new season. First and foremost, there's the new package. I'm not really 100% sure what the whole package consists of. I know that some of it is related to like what we saw at All-Star race this year, and maybe a few other changes. I'm not sure at how many tracks they're going to do that. My thoughts on that, I got to be honest, I don't know what to think. I'm trying to maintain a positive attitude about the thing. I don't want to come out and just rant and rave about something that I haven't really seen at work. I will say this. I am concerned, and I damn sure do not want to see what we saw at the All-Star race. I know there's people who came out right after that race and they were raving about it and talking about how great it was. And I couldn't disagree more. I don't understand the fascination that people had with that race. Yes, it had moments of excitement, but for me, it just comes across as completely fabricated. There's something, I don't want to say phony, but to me, racing should come down to the drivers and the teams. The guys in the pits making adjustments, the crew chief, the decisions being made, the adjustments made to the car, strategy, that kind of stuff. And of course, first and foremost, the driver. That's what racing should be all about. And the more even these cars can be as far as performance, the better, because I think, you don't want an unfair advantage because of equipment. Now, unfortunately, you're never going to have 100%, even field. That's just not realistic. That's not how it works. However, NASCAR's job is to try to implement a certain rules package and oversight of everything that happens to make sure that people are, for the most part, on the up and up and not cheating or pushing the envelope. Now, that's something else I want to talk about, but this rules package, it doesn't sound to me, it sounds to me like it's more designed to create a specific type of racing, and I don't like the sound of that. That's what I mean by manufactured or fabricated form of racing, that where it's kind of, there's like another element that outside of the driver and the crews and the crew chief, there's like an extra element that controls the race, and I'm just not a fan of that. And I damn sure don't want to see races of cars running in packs. I don't want to see pack racing. It's bad enough we have to endure 4 restricted plate races a year, and if this is the direction they're headed, I'm really not thrilled with that. But like I said, I'm gonna wait to see the results before I say anything. Now, here's the other thing, and I might be in the minority in this. I don't understand this focus that people have on the racing being as terrible as it is. In my opinion, the racing isn't bad at all. Yeah, there are certain races that could have been better, But for the most part, we saw a lot of good racing last year or this past season. And it just feels like this idea that the racing is so terrible, it just kind of, it's taken a life of its own. And it's almost like, you know, a snowball effect, and it's just getting worse. And it doesn't seem like there's any way to stop it. There's this momentum of people of just complaining about the racing. And honestly, I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as people claim it is. Could it be better? Absolutely. Are there things NASCAR can do to improve it? Sure. What those things are, you know what? I think there's going to be a lot of disagreements along the way. Just the sound of what they're trying to do, if it turns out to be what I fear that it might be, I'm not going to be happy. I just don't think that the racing has been that bad. And it just sounds like a panic move but on NASCAR's part. I don't think the racing's been that bad. Maybe I'm one of the few guys who think that. You know, you guys can tell me what you think. And I'm not saying there aren't some races that were kind of crappy, but it's always been like that. That's throughout history. There's never been any time where every single race has been amazing. That's the way it is. A lot of some people are like, well, some races end up where a guy's dominating and stuff, but it's always been like that too, you know. I just think that this whole idea of how terrible NASCAR, the actual product, is, I think it's overblown. I think it's just something that I don't fully agree with. There are issues. I just don't think it's as bad as people claim it is. But I personally think the racing was pretty good. Now, there's also this other... The problems that I find with NASCAR, I think, come down to several things, right? Because it's not one thing. It's just a multitude of things. But the biggest problem NASCAR has is the dying fan base. I talked about this before. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more again. But the majority of the fan base within NASCAR is made up of, and this is, some people are not going to like the way this sounds, but it's mostly made up of older white people, right? So before anybody gets all upset, this isn't a race thing. It's not about, you know, it's purely demographics. That's all I'm talking about. And it's a reality that I don't see people talk about. I think that most people that talk about the state of NASCAR and all that stuff are really focused on the actual cars themselves and these packages. And I think the problem is, for the most part, outside of that. Yeah, there are things they need to do to these cars, but I think it's more about ensuring that all of these cars are as evenly matched as possible, so that it comes down to the people and not the equipment. So NASCAR needs to do a better job of that. And like I said before, there are certain things they can do, but as far as, you know, I think that the demographics are a problem, and it's been a problem for a very long time. I go to races every year, and I've been to Richmond. I've been to Charlotte several times. I've been to Poconos many times. Dover many times. I've been to Darlington. And everywhere I've been, the common theme is I see that from what I see in person, the vast majority of fans that show up at these races are older white folks, retired people, people who have been fans all their lives, but it's a specific demographic. Now, I think NASCAR has had a serious issue trying to appeal to a wider fan base. And that's NASCAR's fault. And there are things they can do about it. I don't have a magic wand, but it's a multitude of things that they need to do. It's a multi-pronged approach. It's not going to be something that it's like one thing we do it and it solves all the problems. But you have, first of all, have to come to grips and be honest that yes, that is a problem. The majority of the fan base is made up of older white people. I live in New York, and I can personally tell you, I personally don't know any NASCAR fans. Okay? I'm the only like NASCAR fan within my group of friends, or even people I know and work with on the job, you know. And New York is a massive market, not just in terms of the media, but in terms of demographics. We have a huge melting pot of cultures and people from all walks of life. But the dominant sports that people care about in New York are baseball, basketball, football. Everything else is a distant second. So while I don't think you can reasonably think there's any way to make NASCAR on the same league with those sports in terms of popularity in places like New York, I do think you can do a lot to bridge the gap. And I've talked about this before, but NASCAR needs to do something to expose the sport to more people outside of the South, outside of these older white folks. You know, they're already hardcore fans. They grew up in the sport, and they're gonna die fans. And that's unfortunately the reality. A lot of these fans are dying off every year. I'm telling you, you go to a NASCAR race, the majority of these folks are older white folks, in retirees for the most part. These people are older. They're dying off as time goes on. And if you don't replenish these fans with new fans, then you're going to lose people who support the sport. The replenishment, as far as fans go, is coming from these older white people I'm talking about with their children and their grandchildren. They are inheriting that love of NASCAR through their grandparents, right? So, but that doesn't nearly come close to making up for the loss. And NASCAR is hemorrhaging just fans. So there has to be a bigger, more concerted effort in NASCAR's part to appeal to a broader audience, to go places where normally people don't follow NASCAR. These markets I'm talking about, not just New York, all these inner cities. And I've talked about this before, but I think, right, if I worked at NASCAR and I was someone who was somewhere involved in marketing, right, or whoever it is that's in charge of like sort of marketing the sport and trying to get more fans to come to the sport. If I was involved, I would personally push for NASCAR to do more sort of charity, but every city that NASCAR visits, go to the nearest urban communities where these places where people don't normally follow NASCAR, right? So if you're in Pocono or Dover and Delaware and stuff like that, come out to New York and work with charities and local social clubs and communities as a charity and get group packages for kids, inner city kids, who normally only follow basketball or football, and offer them a free package, weekend, all expense paid, hotel, seats, get them pit passes, and have them go through a tour so you can explain the sport to them and show what happens in the pits and how these teams work on these race cars. even in especially places where there may be a local a team, where you can actually go to these race shops. Yeah, most of them are affiliated in Charlotte, so that might be something that's really not possible. But still, you can expose these young kids who know nothing about NASCAR. Never really, they're not going to on their own sit down and watch a NASCAR race. You have to sort of introduce the sport to them somehow. And that would be a way to do it. And NASCAR is involved with lots of charities. So this is something they can do that's charity in conjunction with these tracks. Because these tracks all have empty seats. Okay? Now, many years ago when I was going to these races, you didn't find any empty seats. But it's not like that anymore. And it hasn't been that way since the last economic collapse around 2008. Even before that. So there are plenty of empty seats at all of these racetracks. So don't tell me that you can't package something at a discount to do some charity and get these kids to come out and expose them to the sport. And in my opinion, right, if you took an X amount of kids out there, right, whatever that number is, I honestly think that you can turn maybe 15 to 20% of these kids into having a strong interest in the sport. I'm not saying hardcore fans, but I think they will walk away with an experience that they've never had and actually understand the sport a little bit, so that when they are sitting at home and there is a race on, they'll actually watch it and they'll remember that, their experience of going. They'll actually kind of know what's going on. And that's how you gain people as fans. So I really think that NASCAR is doing a horrible job of expanding the fan base. And you got to go to where people normally don't follow NASCAR. You can't keep preaching to the choir. These same fans, they're fans for life, the current fan base. The problem is these other groups that are normally not into NASCAR. That's where you got to go. Now, the other problem is this. I honestly think NASCAR needs to start considering running races, definitely Saturday nights, and even maybe midweek. Maybe that I'm not too sure about, right? Because at the same time, people work. Going to a race on a weekend, it's not like going to a basketball game or a baseball game. It's not really a one-day event. So I could see maybe that's not feasible, right? But man, run Saturday night races. These Sunday races, I think that there's a huge part of the season that you're competing with the NFL. That's not good. You're hurting your own sport. People, they're gonna more likely than not watch football. Only super hardcore fans, the people that are already hardcore fans, are gonna turn away from watching a football game to watch a race. So I think NASCAR once again is hurting themselves. I think they should honestly think about moving most of the races to Saturday nights. Also, I think more people are willing to go to races on a Saturday night than on a Sunday, because remember, Monday is a work day. And these NASCAR weekends are kind of long and tiring, and a lot of people travel long distances, and it makes it difficult when you got to work Mondays. Also, if there's a rain delay or rain out or something and there's a postponement, that also really kills the sport. Run these races Saturday nights. Night races are more exciting anyway. And people will watch these races. And then they could still watch football on Sunday. They still have time to travel. Okay? And have time to rest before Monday and going to work. These are things that NASCAR, I think, really needs to look at and would help people be more willing to watch a race who don't normally watch. And you're not competing with football, okay? And even when football's not on, you know, Sunday's just, I don't know, man. Sunday, a lot of people, I don't know, man. I just think Saturday night sounds better to me. So, I don't know what you guys think. You know, let me know what you think. So, you got to expand that fan base. You really got to go out there and get these people to come, expose them to the sport. And I think you can get 15 to 20% turnover, right? So, if you know, you're not going to get everybody. You bring them out there, you show them the sport, you get them to learn about it. But all you need is a 15, 20%. And I think it's realistic to do that. And I mean, I don't know how anyone can go to a live race and listen to these cars and watch these races and learn about what's going on and not get sucked in. So the sport will sell itself, but you need to expose it to people. And I think a 15%, 20% turnover rate would be fantastic. And I'm talking about this demographic, the group of people who don't normally follow stuff like NASCAR. I think you can grab some of these guys. That's a big turnover. So you got to try, man. You got to do better. This sport feels like it's still stuck in that southern old boy mentality. And even though they claim they're trying to expand, but they're not really doing it. They're just not. They're failing. So that would be where I would push. Run Saturday night races. You know, get away from the Sunday races, and you won't compete with NFL. And it also people would like these night races more. So there's that. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the way NASCAR runs the sport in terms of the rules and the policing of the sport. It's horrible. I'm sick and tired of watching these guys who get busted for doing things they're not supposed to do. Now, I've called it cheating. Other people get upset, especially if it's their favorite driver. I took a lot of flack for going after Kevin Harvick. And guess what? Even after that, he did it again. I mean, his team. I'm including the whole team. And I'm going to tell you something else. I don't care what anyone says, man. There's rules for a reason. And when you purposely circumvent the rules, you're doing it because you do have an advantage. And people who claim that it's not a big deal, that it's not an advantage, are full of shit. Because why would you risk the embarrassment of being caught doing this stuff, paying these fines, losing on it? You know, nobody wants to get busted doing that stuff. Why would you risk it if there's not a payoff? So it's bullshit. They do this stuff because there is an advantage. Also, it's not a coincidence that a lot of these cars that win or finish in the top 5, and then later you find out they did something to the car. I mean, come on. I'm not saying it's the only reason these cars are successful. I'm just saying there has to be something to it. And I'm telling you guys, it's dangerous if NASCAR continues to just give these guys a slap on the wrist. Because I don't care how much you fine these guys, they can afford it. And they actually budget for this stuff. If you don't take the win away, if you don't actually give them a harsh punishment, what's the incentive to stop? If you knew that you could keep a win, but yeah, you're going to take a hit with some points, you're going to pay a fine, who cares? A win for a lot of these teams, that's your fucking season. It's a big deal. So where's the incentive not to try shit? Also, I listen to NASCAR radio on Sirius XM, and I hear this commercial sometimes where you have these drivers talking, like I guess these are excerpts from an interview, and there's this fucking Kevin Harvick snippet where he openly comes out and says, if his crew chief or if my crew chief isn't getting in trouble, then he's not trying hard enough. So he's telling you to your face that he wants and expects these guys to circumvent the rules. All right? I'm not going to call it cheating. I don't want anyone to get a heart attack, but he's not the only one. And I don't care if it's my favorite driver. I don't want these guys doing that shit. If you're not careful, I'm telling you now, this is one of the reasons a lot of people look at NASCAR who don't really follow, and they'll be like, I'm always hearing things where somebody's busted for cheating or do. You don't want this people to look at this like the fucking like wrestling. Okay? We all know wrestling's a show, right? For entertainment. NASCAR wants people to understand this is a sport. This isn't a fucking show. Okay? Yes, it's entertainment, but it's a sport. And if you want people to respect it as a sport, you have to have rules and you have to enforce these fucking rules, man. How do you allow people to keep wins after they're busted breaking rules? I don't care what anyone says. That's fucking bullshit. And if that shit really bothers me, I could imagine somebody who's not as hardcore of a fan, they'll look at it and say, what the fuck is this? And he gets to keep the win? Take the fucking win away. Not only take the win away, take all the points away. You get 0 points. And suspend the entire team for the next race, including the driver. You don't run next week. I guarantee you these teams will stop. They'll stop. They'll follow the rules. Okay? That's how you do it. You don't reward people for fucking cheating. Sorry, not cheating, for circumventing or trying something innovative. Whatever the fuck you want to call it. I'm just telling you, this hurts the sport. It hurts the fucking sport. And if you want people to take it seriously as a sport and respect it, you really gotta come down hard. And you gotta make sure these teams adhere to the rules. These are multi-million-dollar teams. They're not doing this by mistake. These things where there's a brace that came off or missing or a spoiler that wasn't up to spec. Come on, man. These fucking teams know what they're doing. None of this is an accident. And if you don't come down hard on them, they're going to keep looking for little ways to get an advantage. I don't want them to have an advantage. I want it to be driver versus driver, crew chief versus crew chief, and the pit crews, how they perform, what kind of adjustments are made throughout the race, what kind of strategy, and of course, the most important thing is the drivers. I want the best drivers to... I don't know how else to put this stuff. And you still get people defending this garbage. So, and they promote this shit. You hear it on the radio. And he's like, well, if my crew chief isn't getting in trouble, then he's not trying hard enough. He's not doing his job. Fuck you, man. That's why I fucking hate... I hate Kevin Harvick. I hate all these guys, man. I just... he's a great driver. I'm not taking anything away from him. But you're a great driver. You shouldn't need an advantage. That's all I got to say about that. As far as this rules package, I really hope it doesn't end up to looking like Talladega every fucking weekend, everywhere you go. That's going to kill it for me. I don't know. And I thought we were at a point where we wanted shorter spoilers, so there's less downforce, so the cars are harder to handle. NASCAR is all over the place. That's another thing. Their messaging is horrible. A couple years ago, when Carl Edwards was still racing, he came out and said, yeah, man, these cars, we want them to be harder to drive. And you ask any of these guys, well, not many of them understand what it's like to drive back in the day, but cars were a lot harder to drive in the old days. These cars are easier to drive. And that's not coming from me. I've heard other people say it, people in the sport who know what they're talking about. These cars are a lot easier to drive. That's the wrong direction to go. That's really all I have to say. I think the majority of the issues NASCAR has as a sport have to do with off-track stuff. Really, the racing was pretty good, in my opinion, for the most part. Last year, there are a lot of races I remember people raving about. So, I don't know, man, where people continue to talk about how horrible the racing is. That's not the problem NASCAR has, in my opinion. So, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you disagree with or agree with. Once again, I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. So I look forward to your comments.